Welcome to Dan the Road Trip Guy. I'm your host, Dan, and each week we'll embark on a new adventure, discovering memory and life lessons of our incredible guests. From everyday travelers to thrill seekers and everyone in between, this podcast is your front row seat to inspiring stories of passion, resilience, and the pursuit of happiness. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. If you followed my podcast for any period of time, you know it's about stories. And I believe everyone has a story. When I started this podcast, I shared with my daughter that I wanted to interview race car drivers. She was quick to point out that I really didn't know any race car drivers, and they probably weren't going to talk to me. Well, that's never stopped me from reaching out to them. I reached out to my guest on LinkedIn. His name's Daly. He's a former Formula One race car driver from the 70s and 80s. He went on to race in kart, which is basically IndyCar today. He's raced in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, finishing fourth there. He is originally from Ireland. He went on after racing to have a successful broadcasting career, and today he does leadership talks with various organizations. And I am just excited to have him on the show. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much. You're a race car driver. Take a warm-up lap and just tell my listeners who is Derek Daly.
So I was born and raised in Dublin, Ireland. When I was born, we had no racing circuits in the country at all. When I was 12 years of age, my dad took me to race around a small village on the outskirts of Dublin City, and that changed the rest of my life because I told him right there and then I wanted to become a professional racing driver. He thought I was off my rocker. Basically, my life since that day has been consumed with motor racing.
Thank you for sharing that. We got to tour Ireland back in 2023. We did a lap of the whole island. That was fun.
Yeah, good. Yeah, my family all still live there, so I go back regularly, and it is a beautiful country. It's changing fast, but it's still a beautiful country.
Well, what was your first streetcar back there in Ireland that you drove around?
My first streetcar was an NSU Prinz, which I'm sure you've never heard of. I have no idea what the NSU stands for, but it was a German rear-engined piece of junk that had 4 forward gears and reverse that never worked. And that was my first foray into being able to move around myself with a roof over my head.
And when in Ireland do you start driving?
You get a license when you're 18.
Okay.
You can drive a motorcycle when you're 16, but 18 for a car license.
People who are listening that don't know, you drive on the left side of the road.
Yes. For the first half of my life, that was the right side of the road. Now it's the wrong side of the road, having lived in America for so long.
Any fun stories from that car?
Well, when I left secondary school, which is high school here, my mother had an aspiration that maybe I could get a legitimate job as an accountant for a plant hire company, which is basically a heavy equipment rental company. And I was driving my NSU Prinz home one day, and I smelled something burning, looked in the mirror, and there was 50 feet of flames coming out the back of it. I stopped the car, of course, took my pullover off, tried to put it out. The fire only got worse. By sheer chance, a neighbor in a rally car was passing, had a fire extinguisher, put the fire out. I towed it to a friend's garage, worked half the night, rebuilt the wiring harness, cleaned up the oil leak, and drove it back to work the next day. We were very resourceful back in those days.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we had a little bit of car trouble when we were in Ireland. I've driven manuals my whole life, but I got a rental with manual, and I believe whoever had it before me clearly kept the clutch pedal in a lot, so the clutch burned up pretty quickly. Yeah. And I was amazed at how quickly people who didn't know us came to our rescue.
Good. Yeah, and for people who might have an interest, an NSU looks like a mini version of the old Corvair. Remember the much hated Corvair?
Oh, yes. My uncle had one.
Rear-engined.
Yeah.
The NSU Prinz looked like a mini version of that car.
Well, good. I'm sure you've moved on since then and had some nice cars. So.
Yep.
You are a former Formula One driver, but any epic road trips in your life, either as family or later on in life?
Myself and Barbara are big fans of road trips. We have a home in Arizona, and another one in Indianapolis. So
Okay.
quite a lot we would drive across, on a northern route or a southern route. When I lived in Europe, we did a lot of road trips because did a lot of testing. And so you would go across 2 or 3 countries in the same trip. I mean, the countries in Europe, particularly back in the day, were very different. So we enjoyed a lot of those, but we did a lot of road mileage
Hmm.
in the early days.
Speaking of the roads in Ireland, there was one, I was following Waze, and it said, turn here. So we turned, and after a couple miles, I'm like, is this a driveway or is this actually a road? Narrowed quite quickly.
Yeah, pretty normal in Ireland. Yeah, and part of the charm, I think.
Yeah, no, it was. It was.
Yeah, yeah.
It was great. So you talked about your dad. You went to a race, and that was kind of the epiphany moment, I guess. That's when you decided you wanted to be a race car driver. So take us on that journey of. So you were how old? You said 12.
So I was 12 when I got off the bus and walking through our neighborhood, and I saw this green British registered truck parked on the side of the road outside a house, and it had Sydney Taylor Racing written on the side of it. And I thought, wow, I bet there's a racing car in there. The lady who lived there, it was her brother, and she happened to buy her groceries from my dad. And she had been in earlier in the day and told my dad that there was a racing car in there, and I could see it at 7 o'clock that night. We went back at 7 o'clock. They opened the doors, and there was a white Brabham BT8 with a green stripe and an Irish shamrock on it, and I actually touched it, and that was the first racing car I ever saw or I ever touched. And then my dad said, I'll take you to see a race the next day, which he did. And so that was the moment for me. And it's like a HD video in my mind because I remember the noise, the color, the smell, the speed, everything about the day. Now, back in that day, when you raced on the roads, the street circuit, there were no safety barriers. We just literally sat on the grass bank and the cars raced right by us. But I mean, that's how basic it was back in the day. But I was determined, I was mission focused that I would be a racing driver. And I did the normal things, went to school and did as best I could. I wasn't a good learner in school. They told you to sit down and they shovel information into you. I didn't learn that way. I was a show me, don't tell me type of learner. I struggled through school. When I was 16, I went demolition derby jalopy racing. At least it was a start. It was dirty, rough, but at least I was able to practice car control. To buy a Formula Ford, I went to Australia and I was a labourer in the iron ore mines of Australia from the winter of 73 to March 74. I came back with £5,000, which is $10,000 back in the day. And that meant I could actually buy a Formula Ford and start, real road racing, real racing. And at that stage, they had just built a racing circuit in Ireland called Mondello Park.
Okay.
Everything went well there. I won the Irish Championship in 1975, went to England in 76, won 23 races there. In England, it was an interesting situation because I had a chunk of money. I had about £5,000 ready to go for the season in 1976 in England. So it means I could live or I could race, but I couldn't do the two at the same time. I bought an old bus. My mother made curtains. My dad made a mattress. I put a toolbox in and set off for England and spent the year like a gypsy, just going racetrack to racetrack, trying to see how we could get on. I won 23 races. And at the end of the year, I managed to get a sponsor to move me up into the Formula 3 championship.
Okay.
The Formula 3 was legitimate. You could race in England and you could race in Europe. And it's the same today. You got Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3. So it was the bottom step of the ladder. Things began to go well for me. At the British Grand Prix in 1977, I got into a big tussle for the lead of the race with a British driver called Stephen South. And I was leading, led most of the race. Anyway, got tangled up with him when he tried to force me off the road. I wouldn't give. I was a typical stubborn Irish young guy at the time. He flew off the road, ended up in Stoke Mandeville Hospital. I spun and was in tears when I was telling my sponsor, look, I can win these races. We have to go to the next Formula One support race, which happened to be at the Austrian Grand Prix, at the old Österreich ring, which is now called the Red Bull ring.
Right.
So we go there. I qualify on the pole. I'm beside Nelson Piquet. We're both strapped into our cars on the pre-grid. And this older gentleman that had a limp and a shuffle went across the front of my car up to my sponsor, leaned up to him and said something to him. And then he limped and shuffled away. And my sponsor came down into the cockpit of my car and said, that fella there just said, if you win this race, he'll put you in a Formula One car by the end of the year. And I said to him, I said, who was it? He said it was a fella called Sidney Taylor. So remember when I was 12 years of age?
Right.
The truck in my neighborhood, Sidney Taylor Racing written on the truck.
Wow.
And 12 years later, I meet the man for the first time ever. And he says he's going to put me in a Formula One car. I went out, had a ding-dong battle with Nelson Piquet, won the race, and I was in a Formula One car 3 months later testing at Goodwood in England.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
That is a great story.
Yeah.
So, and then you tested in Formula One. From what I've gathered, and again, it's kind of hard to find that old footage sometimes, but I found this clip, and it's only a clip. I can't find the full footage. Maybe you can help me. It's supposedly your first Formula One race. It was a non-points race at Silverstone, according to the wonderful world of the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was your first outing other than the testing?
So what happened was, the testing was at Goodwood in England in the Theodore chassis. When I applied for my super license, the FIA would not grant me a super license, that I didn't have enough experience.
Okay.
That killed my instant opportunity to race Formula One at a Grand Prix level. Now, 2 weeks later, I got a call from Hesketh. Hesketh was the team that James Hunt started racing Formula One with.
Absolutely.
I got a call from Hesketh that said there's a non-championship Formula One race called the International Trophy at Silverstone. And because it's non-championship, I didn't need a super license. And would I like to race their car? Of course, I jumped at the chance. James Hunt qualified on the pole in the McLaren. Niki Lauda was in the race, Ronnie Peterson, James Hunt, Mario Andretti. I mean, it was full of the big names.
Yes.
The International Trophy, the non-championship race back then, was used for teams to run new cars, test suspensions, test new drivers, before the season started. So all the teams were there. It was raining, typical Silverstone in March. I can't remember where I qualified, maybe 8th or 9th or 10th, somewhere along there. Anyway, I got a great start. James Hunt led through the first corner, which is Copse Corner, the same corner that's there today. And I had managed to get into second place by the first corner. Halfway around the lap, I passed James Hunt around the outside and ran away into the lead. And Murray Walker, who's the great commentator from England at the time, was shouting and screaming like his pants were on fire that Derek Daly was leading in his very first Formula One race. So it was an amazing piece of video and an amazing debut in Formula One.
Yeah, he was, I believe, in this little clip, he was calling you the master of rain.
That was James Hunt later in Monaco.
Oh, okay.
Because in 1982, when it rained in Monaco, I got into the lead of the race and was leading when I was about to start my last lap when the gearbox broke. Well, that's when James Hunt, because James Hunt had followed me in Formula Ford. Before I got into Formula 3, I knew that I was very quick in the wet. So that's how I got the relationship with him, and he and his respect for me in tricky conditions. And by the way, the leap from Formula Ford, F-O-R-D, which it's still a class of racing that goes on in America today and in Canada. But my jump from Formula Ford to Formula One only took 13 months.
Wow.
It is still the record today. Even though Verstappen got there very fast, my jump from Formula Ford to Formula One is still faster in the history of Formula One.
And you were up against some big names. You mentioned some of them. So
it was a classic era back in the day. Lauda and Regazzoni in the Ferrari, John Watson, Mario Andretti and Ronnie Peterson in the Lotus, James Hunt in the McLaren. It was a classic time in Formula One.
Yeah, and so interesting to watch the videos that show the in-car. I was watching one of James Hunt and what you guys drove compared to today. I mean, obviously.
They were death traps. I tell people nowadays, because of carbon fiber and the high sides and the cockpits, made of carbon fiber. Now drivers are truly inside the cars when they race. We were on top of the cars when they raced. I told people we sat on the car. They now sit in the car.
Yeah.
Because all there was a flimsy fiberglass body around the tops of our cars, and we were literally exposed to anything heavy that came flying through the air.
They don't have to reach that right hand down and use that little shifter on the right-hand side.
No, yeah, it was much, much more difficult back in the day to balance the car with one hand on the steering wheel, three pedals in the car, clutch, a brake, and a throttle. I had to heel toe to synchronize the gears. It was much, much more difficult back in that day.
Yeah. Of course, then you kind of wrapped up in Formula One and you came over our way and raced in IndyCar, Champ Car, whatever we want to call it back in those days.
Yeah, and that was that. It was another by chance. I was at the end of our Formula One season was Las Vegas in 1982, and 3 weeks I think after the end of the Grand Prix season was the last round of the IndyCar Championship was going to be held in Phoenix. I'd never heard of Phoenix. I didn't know where it was. Never seen an oval track, but I got a chance. Would I want to come and race this thing? And I said, sure, yeah, I'd like to see. Got to Phoenix. It was the roughest, dirtiest car I'd ever seen. I needed a tetanus injection to get into it, but I thought I'd come a long way. I might as well have a go. And my impression was a Formula One car from 0 to 100 miles an hour is faster than an Indy car. But from 100 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour, an Indy car was faster than a Formula One car. And I thought, man, this is a beast of a thing. And I wouldn't mind racing this at the Indy 500 because the Indy 500 was the only IndyCar race we ever got in Europe. It was the only one I'd ever seen on television.
Okay.
And I thought that would be really interesting to do that. And so I qualified 9th beside Johnny Rutherford, who's a hero of mine. I'm looking across the grid, and there's the great Johnny Rutherford. And I thought, you know what? I would like to do this. And so I came in 1983, met a guy called Tony Bettenhausen. The Bettenhausen family were very famous in the world of IndyCar. Tony's dad raced there. His brother raced, both of his brothers raced there. And I met Tony, and Tony wanted me to drive for his team. And I really only came for curiosity and never left. No plan. Nothing, just never left America, and it's been my life since 1983, living in America.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
Well, and then you then you became a broadcaster.
Yeah, and another unplanned career. So I had an accident in '84. Was all but killed in Michigan.
Yeah.
I was in about after 19 surgeries and 3 years in therapy. My racing career sort of got off track a little bit. I got back full-time racing in 87 until 92. But in the meantime, I went to Vegas to the last IndyCar race in 1984, 3 or 4. I think it was 84. Did an interview with ESPN that turned into a 10-year contract.
Oh, well.
Did an interview with ESPN, got a call a week later, would I like to do color? I said, sure. And then I realized I had actually no idea what I agreed to. I'd never heard the term color before. I didn't know what a color commentator was. But ESPN were going to pay me to travel the world and talk about the sport that I love while I'm in recuperation. So it was perfect.
Yeah.
So I get back full-time racing. I've got a television gig going at the same time. So when I wanted to finish driving, I already had a broadcasting career well established. So it was the perfect scenario to move into the television broadcasting world. And that went on for another 24 years after I raced.
Wow. Well, that's great. Great career, right? And you're still going, and we'll talk about that in a moment, what you're up to.
Yeah.
Rear view mirrors, they're on cars. I'm sure in racing, again, I'm not a racer, but I'm sure they're there to see who's coming up behind you. But in life, sometimes we can use those to learn a lesson or have some regrets, maybe sometimes, which we try not to stare at those. But anything in your rear view mirror that you might change?
Well, I mean, hypothetically, I would change some things, but obviously you can't go back.
That's right.
everything happened for me so fast in racing. When I got to Formula One, I don't think I was really equipped to race at that level. I don't think I had the experience to race at that level because I didn't spend years in the lower formula,
Right.
where you get the experience. Yeah, so I don't regret it, but I would change it
Right.
if I went back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, I can't change my accident. I'd rather not have had my accident.
Sure.
But if I didn't have my accident, where would I be today? Would I be dead? Would something else have happened to me?
Yeah.
If I went on a different path? I don't know. So you can't change it, but I'd rather not have had it. But my accident gave me a platform and a lesson that's invaluable, even though it's painful. And that's hard for people to grasp, because you like, if I told somebody that I'm in pain every day because of my accident, they can't fathom that anybody could be in pain every day because of an accident. Well, I am, but it doesn't make any difference to me. Like, my pain tolerance is so much higher than most people could understand. But I just learned how to deal with it, how to work with it, how to adapt and change, how to manage it. And that's a great lesson in life, because I tell people when I do these keynote speeches, we've all crashed.
Absolutely.
We've all hit the wall, but how do you process it? How do you make sense out of it? How do you move forward enriched by even bad things that happen to you? I tell people, look, when bad things happen, it's not inherently negative. It's potentially a time to learn and grow and transform, but it depends on the mindset that you approach it with. And that's a major lesson I got from my accident, even though it was a painful one.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's good. And speaking of those keynotes, so now we'll look through the windshield, because that's a better view, what's out front. What are you up to?
Well, I don't do that much these days. I suppose I'm semi-retired. I'll never actually retire, because I'm mission driven. I like to accomplish things. I like to have purpose every day. But the main thing I do these days is I do corporate keynote speeches.
Okay.
I'm represented by probably some of the biggest bureaus in America. And I essentially share with corporate America the high performance principles of the business model of motorsports. And I don't think in all the sports that I've seen, I don't think there's another business model that operates on the edge of what might be possible like motor racing. And so I get such a kick out of being able to influence corporate America with the sport that I've dedicated my life to. And it's just such a kick. I just got back last night from Dallas, Texas. I was with GM Financial, 500 people in the room, and I got a standing ovation. And it wasn't for me. It was for the learning time, the environment that I managed to create. And all I did was storytell about experiences, good and bad, that I've had in racing. And when you can storytell and engage people and pass on a key critical message, you've had a good mission. And I love that mission today of keynote speaking. And again, it's a career, because I consider it a career, a third career that I literally fell into because of motor racing, and I love to do it.
Yeah, that's great. And I've found a few of those online. They're quite encouraging to listen to. So thank you.
Yeah. I have a YouTube channel, Derek Daly. Derek Daly, keynote speaker. And it's just, I put the stuff on there because I'd love to just share the storylines and influence people.
Yeah.
It's a kick.
Yeah, it was interesting. You posted on LinkedIn some affirmations. I think you'd walk through University of Michigan, and I meet with a group on Thursday mornings, and I had seen it on Wednesday. And the weird thing is, we were discussing affirmations, and I'm like, okay, everybody, I have to share this. And Now everybody in that group knows who Derek Daly is. So that's kind of
Yeah, there you
cool.
go. There you go. And I seldom see affirmations now on office walls or when I go into corporations.
I
So I was
know.
so surprised
Yeah.
when I went to the credit union how strongly they believed in them.
Yeah. I assume you're still hanging around on the grid because your son is racing in IndyCar at the moment.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I go to a lot of the races, not as many as I did. I just find air travel these days is just such a pain. The chances of getting your flights these days are such hit and miss. And unfortunately, they just don't care. So I do restrict my travel because quite frankly, I love being at home too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And so we're coming close to the end of our road trip, and I can't thank you enough. But you've left my listeners with a lot of advice. But if there was one piece of advice you would give to people, what would it be?
Well, everybody, everybody, commits themselves to do a variety of different things in their life. And people say, well, I'd like to do this or I'd like to do that. And I say to them, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? People say, I'd like to lose 25 pounds in weight. And I'll say, well, do you want to lose it? Because if you want to, you have to commit to it. And when my middle son, Colin, was 12, he was great on wakeboards behind a ski boat. And at 12 years of age, he could do a backflip and a complete roll. Not many 12-year-olds could do that. And then as he went on through his teenage years, he would hardly ever practice, but he could just jump on it and bang, do it again. And then when he was in his 20s, he could do it again so easily and effortlessly. And I said to him, I said, Colin, how with no practice can you do something like that on water behind a boat, and you do a complete flip upside down? And he looked at me, he says, you have to commit to it. And that ties it all together for me. Because when people say, I want to do this, this, and this, or I'd like to do this, this, and this, when you replace the word with I want to do it, want is a commitment. Like is a desire. You see what I mean?
Right.
And so if you truly want to get something done, you have to commit to it. And when you commit, it might be difficult, but you got to stay the course. And when I wrote my first book, Race to Win, it was about developing a race car driver. And Mario Andretti is a good friend of mine. And I asked Mario, what is the differentiator between people who make it in our world and who don't quite make it? I said, is it money, budget, talent, cars? What is it? And he looked at me, he said, it's desire. Desire to push through when things get difficult. And desire comes into play when you've committed to do something and you push hard and it doesn't go your way. Desire means you stay with it. You push through. And that's the difference between I'd like to do something and I want to do something.
Wow.
I won't hold you up too long, but
No.
I read a great quote from Roger Penske
Sure.
one day. Because I really appreciate and respect what he's done as a man, both building a race team and in business. But Roger was asked one day, when you employ new people, do you put them in a position where they can be the best they can be? And he said, not necessarily. He said, what we like to do is put them in a position where they want to be the best they can be. So do you see the difference? So when you want, you commit.
Yeah.
And when you commit, then desire steps in when necessary, when things get rough. But if you want something and you commit and you have the desire, the chances are you will get there. And when people see you doing it and committed to it, it's amazing how they want to come alongside you to help you get there, help you achieve your dream.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That was great. As we wrap up,
So that's
sorry.
my lesson for the day.
Yeah, the lesson for the day. People pay money to probably come and hear that. So
They do. Yeah.
Well, this has been an honor for me, Derek, and I can't thank you enough. This is kind of a dream. My wife said you get kind of giddy when you do these things, and I said, well, I'm really kind of nervous today. I'm interviewing a guy who raced cars and was a broadcaster and still is.
Yeah. Well, great, good. Hopefully, it'll help you get your podcast on the road. When you put it online, please do email me the link, and I'll send it out on my social media channels.
Yeah, and leave my listeners, if you will, real quick with how to find you.
Oh, very easily. DerekDaly.com, DerekDaly.com is my website, and my website will connect you to my Instagram account, my Facebook account, and my Twitter X account.
All right. Perfect.
Great.
Well, Derek, thank you again.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for tuning in to Dan, the Road Trip Guy. I hope you enjoyed our journey today and the stories that were shared. If you have any thoughts or questions or stories of your own, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family and help us to spread the joy of road trips and great conversations. Until next time, keep driving, keep exploring, and keep having those amazing conversations. Safe travels. And remember, you can find me on the internet at dantheroadtripguy.com.